the KMNN studios, this is the Kids Morning News Network. Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. It's May 29th, 2024, the 150th day of the year. I'm Alex in the KMNN studio in New York. Hope everyone here in the U.S. enjoyed your Memorial Day weekend. On this day in 1790, Rhode Island became the last of the 13 colonies to ratify or agree to the Constitution, which was really the beginning of the United States. Today, we know Rhode Island as the smallest of the 50 states, but back then it was known for being really independent, even among the colonies. It was the first colony to call for a Continental Congress before the Revolutionary War began, and also the first colony to say it would no longer be part of Great Britain. But after the war, it didn't want to be part of the United States either, at least not the way the Constitution laid things out. The other 12 states actually threatened to boycott Rhode Island if it didn't join in. They said they would not trade with it. So it came around eventually. Glad to have you join us, Rhode Island. It wouldn't be the same without you, especially since KMNN special correspondent Sarah Adler lives there. We start the news today with an update from Starliner, the new spacecraft scheduled to blast off with its first ever crew on board. After several technical delays, it's now scheduled to lift off from Florida this Saturday, June 1st. And as always, we'll follow along here on KMNN. Also in outer space today, a look back in time. Yes, back in time. Scientists have seen something from around 13 billion years ago thanks to the Webb Space Telescope. They recently spotted two black holes and their galaxies merging together. One of the black holes is about 50 million times larger than our sun. They think the other one is probably about the same size. These are further away from us than any other merging black holes ever detected. They are so far away that the light from them took all this time, almost since the Big Bang, to make it here to Earth for us to see. I wonder if the telescope could see the light from a few days ago when I lost my phone. That would really help. In other news, have you ever played with a cat? A lot of them really love cardboard boxes. A cat named Galena from Utah is one of those cats, or she was until recently. That's because Galena disappeared from her home. Her owners looked high and low for her but could find no sign. Then they got a call. Galena's microchip had been scanned and she was safe in California at an Amazon warehouse. Yes, Galena was mailed to California accidentally. Her owners ordered some things from Amazon and Galena jumped into the box to play. Then the owners taped up the box to return something, not realizing their beloved cat was inside. Galena is apparently a quiet cat and she didn't meow. She survived several days without food or water. Fortunately, the weather wasn't too hot or too cold, and she is just fine and home safely. But her owners are keeping boxes away from her for now. On every episode of this podcast, we talk about the weather, or about the forecast anyway. Today, I'm going to really talk about the weather. It's pretty amazing when you think about it. Nature doing big stuff, always changing, and it's always there for you to see. I don't know what it's like where you live, but we're getting some pretty crazy storms these days here around the KMNN studio. And sometimes I talk to special correspondents Liam and Finn about them. We'll talk about why big thunderstorms happen this time of year. It's not something that happens out of nowhere. It's a natural process that happens in steps. So right now, I'm going to go through the steps of how a big storm happens. And if you don't want to hear them, you can skip ahead to today's riddle. Okay, so it's springtime and the seasons are changing. We see that in lots of little ways. Flowers blooming and longer days, butterflies and birds that we didn't see all winter. But going from winter to summer means that big weather patterns are both trying to kind of throw their weight around. You have winter's freezing cold air coming down from the north and warm or even hot air coming up from the south. And then with more sunlight and longer days, warm air forms right on the ground as well. Now, anytime you have cold air and warm air meeting, you set the stage for some kind of storm. Any moisture in either of those fronts can turn to rain. But things can get a little more lively when the cold air tries to flop down over everything, and the warm air, usually being formed on the ground from all the sunshine, wants to rise and wants to push through that cold air. That's called an updraft, and it can make these towering clouds like skyscrapers in the sky. Updrafts can go so high that their tops get blown by the winds higher in the atmosphere. And sometimes you can see them. You can see the direction of the wind by the way the top gets blown back. That's actually the Earth cooling off. The rising warm air carries heat up into the atmosphere where it's cooler. Then the moisture in the air, it's called humidity, condenses like the water that forms on the side of a cold glass, and then it falls. That water, now it's rain, is cooler than the hot air, and it pulls cool air down with it as it falls. When that cool air hits the ground, it splashes out to the side, and that's why it gets windy, usually a cool wind ahead of a storm. Okay, well, we'll talk more about weather in other episodes if you want. Just let me know if you're interested. Get your grown-up to help and send me an email at kidsmorningnews@gmail.com. Time for today's riddle. On Friday, the riddle was, I have a heart that doesn't beat. What am I? Answer, an artichoke. We like artichokes here in the KMNN studio. Today's riddle, what kind of band never plays any music? Give you the answer on Friday. On this day in 1953, the first two people in history reached the summit of Mount Everest, the tallest point on Earth. They were Sir Edmund Hillary from New Zealand and Tenzing Norgay, who is from Nepal, where Mount Everest is located. People had been thinking about climbing Everest for about 100 years by then, and several expeditions had tried and failed. The 1953 expedition was from Great Britain. Between climbers and local porters they hired to carry their equipment, it had about 400 people in it. The Sherpa people from Nepal and Tibet were hired as guides. Tenzing Norgay was already well known as the most experienced of the Sherpas and a very strong climber. He'd already been on 6 other Everest expeditions. Edmund Hillary was excited to meet him. The team set up base camp in March. It was called base camp because it was at the base of the mountain. Then they made higher camps one at a time as they went up. One pair of climbers tried to reach the top and got very close. But at the top of Everest, which is 29,000 feet, most people need to breathe oxygen from bottles because the air is so thin. The first team's oxygen bottles weren't working, so they turned around. Well, the next two climbers were Tenzing and Hillary. They climbed with a support team up to about 28,000 feet, but then they were on their own. At 11:30 in the morning on May 29th, they realized they'd reached the top. Hillary took some pictures to prove it, and after 15 minutes, they began the long, slow journey down. Their news amazed the world, and both Hillary and Tenzing were instantly famous. Afterward, both of them had more adventures and worked to educate people about the mountains. Edmund Hillary felt a great debt to Tenzing Norgay and the Sherpa people, and he worked to build schools and hospitals for them. Sherpas are still invaluable guides on Mount Everest. Just last week, a 54-year-old Sherpa named Kami Rita climbed Everest for, get this, the 30th time, an all-time record. The previous record was held by, well, Kami Rita, but besides him, the next closest climber is a good friend of his who has 27 summits to his name. Kami Rita says he's retiring from guiding on the mountain, but he will be back to Everest working in base camp. Unlike last weekend, the weather today is forecast to be calm all across the country. There may be some rain across the Midwest and in the Northeast. pleasantly warm, and maybe some gusty winds in the Dakotas, but not much else to talk about. That's the show. Thank you very much for listening. If you liked it, please give it a like on your podcast app and subscribe, and spread the word about the Kids Morning News Network. Grown-ups, I could use your support. If you'd like to become a supporter, there is a link in the episode description. I'll be back on Friday, and I hope you are too. From the KMNN Newsroom, this is Alex, signing off.